everyone. Welcome, viewers, to Young Farmers and Cooks Conference. I am Cara Warren, host of Cutting the Curd and on Heritage Radio Network. And today I have an awesome panel of cheesemakers, dairy farmers, experts in the field, the entire gamut. So what we'd like to do is take a deep dive into the future of artisanal American cheese by first sort of having each person say their name and give a quick introduction to what aspect of the industry they are related to. So Carlos, I'm gonna go to you first, throw it to you first to do the intro.
Hi, everyone. My name is Carlos Yescas. I'm the program director of the Oldway Cheese Coalition. We are an advocacy organization for traditional and raw milk cheeses. We work around the world, but mostly in the United States. And I also do consulting work in Latin America with small artisanal producers in the region.
Okay, thanks, Carlos. Okay, Veronica, to you.
My name is Veronica Pedraza. I'm the head cheesemaker and operations manager of Blakesville Creamery in Port Washington, Wisconsin. We're a farmstead creamery, so we have about 1,200 goats that we milk year round. And we started our business in 2020.
Brand new. I love it. Thank you, Veronica. Yesenia, can you go next?
Yeah, my name is Yesenia ILB Major. I'm co-owner of Vermont Shepherd with my husband, David, we've been milking for 30 years plus. We're sheep farmers, shepherds, and cheesemakers. And pretty much we do it all. So we go from milking to grazing to lambing to milking to cheese making to quality of cheese and shipping out all over the nation and as far as we can, if possible.
Wow. Okay, another not so small feat you're taking on. Anne, to you next, please.
Sure. My name's Anne Saxelby. I'm the founder and co-owner of Saxelby Cheesemongers. We have a retail shop in New York in the Chelsea market, and we also have a wholesale business to restaurants and other retail shops. And we also operate a mail order business online. But our focus is working with regional cheese producers. We source all domestic cheeses and really focus in the Northeast and also a little cluster in Wisconsin. So we buy cheese from Veronica and from Yesenia.
Mm-hmm. All right, well, thank you guys for all doing those quick introductions. We're all here today to basically discuss the impact of the pandemic on the cheese industry, which has sort of been good and bad in many ways. And I think this is a great way to kind of review that. So what I'd like to do is sort of start at the retail level and sort of say to you, Anne, I guess then, what has been the sort of differences that you've noticed right away since this has started in March?
Well, it's been, I mean, to say it's been like a roller coaster is like the understatement of the year. So in March, basically before the pandemic happened, 50% of our business was retail and 50% of our overall business was wholesale. And of that 50% that was wholesale, 70% of that was to restaurants. So pretty much immediately, all the restaurant business went away and most of our retail business went away too. The Chelsea market where our shop is located is a very tourist heavy location in New York. I would say most of the traffic comes from tourists and then also from people working in the building for big companies like Google and YouTube and things like that. And of course, they're all working from home now kind of indefinitely. So our Chelsea market store really took a dive. But thankfully, there were kind of two mechanisms that we had in place that never really did much of anything for us, they weren't like meaningful contributors to the business in terms of overall dollars. But all of a sudden our mail order business really took off in an unexpected way because people were just, stuck at home and ordering food to be delivered to them. And then we also work with a service called Mercado, at mercado.com. And they kind of act as like a fresh direct, I don't know, for people, or Peapod, I guess, is a more nationwide example of that. where people can order from small businesses and have that food delivered to their homes. So those were two shifts that we saw happen kind of immediately.
And so then I wonder, to go to the cheesemaker level, maybe Veronica, you can speak to this. Have you, with e-commerce relationships now, how has that worked on your side?
We don't have any e-commerce relationships.
Yeah, good for you.
We were supposed to get the keys to our creamery the first week of April, and we were supposed to be licensed and inspected the first week of April by the Department of Agriculture. And when the stay-at-home order in Wisconsin went in place in March, we were told by the Department of Agriculture that we would have to basically wait until that stay-at-home order was lifted to even begin processing. So our operations were delayed by 3 months. And sort of once I got started making cheese, you know, it's too late to think about the holidays and e-commerce.
Gotcha. And Yesenia, on your side, was there, were you able to make a site for yourself?
So what happened to us pretty much is, let's see, I have it all here. All of the wholesale and restaurants, all of that crashed for us. The downs were that the wholesale business went down, that we had no more sales and restaurants. We were also selling to airlines, that we lost that. All of the distributors went down, and maybe only 30% of that is working in pretty much more locally areas. And the upside of things is that we got more involved in direct sales, more local direct sales, and working with local farmers and providing like products for home deliveries. So we picked up a lot on home deliveries and collaborating with farms like Sunderland Farms in Northampton and Leaping Farm. We also got involved in a lot of more CSAs, where we just sent 25 wedges to somewhere in Manchester, Vermont this week, CSA there, and Northshire Grown CSA. We're still working with them, and providing more local, you know, products for that. And then for farm stands, there's a lot more farm stands that are carrying our products, like Wild Carrot, Rhubarb, Harlow's, Pete's Stand, Live Water. And our mail order was less than 10%, but now it's between like 25 and 35%. So
Wow. So would you say you're breaking even, or have your sales increased since the pandemic?
well, it went down, and now we're kind of like at an even state and going up further because of mail orders and direct sales. And, you know, we also did that in our own farm store, where all of our prices went down to all of our wholesale prices for all of our local folks, that anybody that was coming to the farm store. So they were able to get whole wheels themselves just for their families and, you know, to stay at home.
No, that's great. And was there any, did the distributors that you were loyal with, were they upset in any way, or was this okay for them?
You mean the pricing or not selling?
Oh, it's like your regional distributors. Like, I guess Anne is a distributor for you to food service. Anne, were you upset in any way for the farms to go direct now to customers?
Definitely not. No, I feel like everyone's just got to, you know, keep selling the cheese. It's like, you can't turn off a cow or a goat or a sheep. They're going to keep making milk no matter what else is going on in the world. So you have to find an outlet for that milk and for that cheese. So yeah, we were like, hey, however, everybody's got to do it. You know, and I feel like, thankfully, this movement of kind of people, I feel like there has been like an awakening of people like deciding to support small business and like realizing like how interconnected we are and how important it is to do those things. I think that's been like a really cool groundswell, and kind of like a rising tide floats all boats in the midst of all this kind of, you know, bad news.
Yeah, the heightened exposure. I do get a sense. I talked to a friend the other day. She was using Instacart, and she was like, I can't find the specialty foods that I want to find, and that's what I want. You know, because people want specialty food, I think we have awoken something So
Mhm.
I like where we're going on this. Veronica, with your cheese, you started a segue to the type of recipes you're doing. You didn't anticipate to make fresh chev, and now you are. How's that going in your market?
We didn't anticipate making fresh chev or really making like an aged cheese. I was focused on soft ripened cheeses and blue cheese, which definitely took a hit during COVID. But I think that I think people want access to specialty food, and previously their consumption of that was sort of in the domain of restaurants. And just because they don't have access to those restaurants doesn't mean that they don't want those foods anymore. It's just the manner of delivering them to people. So, we've seen a lot of our restaurant clients like expand they've turned their dining rooms into like little markets, where people can get, we've got a restaurant in Chicago called Daisy's that, they did pasta, and now they're still making pasta and they're still making sauces and stuff, but they're selling everything a la carte for people to assemble at home. So, I think we've just shifted. I think we're just moving something from one realm to another.
Gotcha. Carlos, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I would like to interject here because so one of the things that we heard at the pandemic right at the beginning from a lot of the people that we communicate to, which are we call them the cheese lovers and the people out there, wanting to eat cheese. The number one question is, where do I buy cheese, right? This was a question and because the response was like, you can go to the supermarket, but people didn't feel like they could find at the supermarket the cheeses that they were looking for or other products. And so the first thing that we did at the coalition was to create a directory of over 500 independent stores around the United States. And we have seen sort of enormous traffic to this page that we now have, because people can put in their zip code and they can find their local store. And that's really what we want to incentivize, because one of the things that we're worried about in sort of the future is that, it's great that people are ordering cheese from Vermont and Wisconsin, but that has an environmental impact in the terms of transportation, all the packaging that is necessary if you live in California or Florida. And so not only that, but also it has an impact on small businesses in some of these communities. And so if those stores or independent delis start to disappear in some places, they won't be able to come back, and it's only the big supermarkets that will stay. And so we want to incentivize people not only to buy directly from farmers, which is a great thing to do, but also try to support local stores. And we think that this is a way forward, sort of combining those two things, so mail order, but also going and trying to find out what your store near you is selling at the moment.
And Carlos, just to remind the viewers, this is listed on your website on Oldway's Cheese.
Right, and I'll put a link so that is direct to people. We didn't do anything. It's an app. You put your zip code and it gives you the cheese store near you. I think it's pretty cool that we were able to do that. And if people have recommendations of local stores that we want to put in, we're more than willing to put them in. There's no cost to anyone. We just want to make sure that people have a place to buy cheese.
Yeah,
of course. And that actually reminded me about Victory cheese boxes. Anne, are you and raise a hand who's participating in Victory cheese in this panel group? Okay, 1, 2, 3.
I think so. I think we do different.
I think you do.
Are we part of that? Yeah, we are part of that.
I think you're a part of that. So, so as a way to give back, I don't know if it's giving back per se, because I'm not a spokesperson for Victory Cheese, but it's a curated artisanal American cheese box that people can buy from their local cheese shops. Did I get that right, everyone? Pretty much?
I think it's wider than just cheese shops.
Okay.
We've participated with a couple local restaurants that have done them.
Okay, so that's another way the viewers can help support the cheese industry as well. just to put it out there, because we're looking for all ways to support this, everything that we're doing right now. Yeah, another thing I'd like to now kind of focus into is who are the next generation of cheesemakers, excuse me. We've seen third and fourth generation families now, their sons and daughters are not taking on those farms. And maybe it's the migrant workers next who need mentorship or, that sort of advice. Carlos, can you speak more to how that might work? What kind of programs are out there?
Sure, and thank you for bringing this up. So one of the things that we have been paying attention, maybe now for about 3 years, was what is the succession planning for a lot of these traditional cheese producers in the United States. One of the worries that we have and that we saw at the beginning of last year was that, for example, Franklin Stella may disappear. It's a cheese that had been made for a long time. There were many producers. The last producer was Franklin
Palooza.
making it, and then that cheese, disappeared because that cheesemaker lost their lease to their plant. This is an issue that is happening more and more. There are some farms, cheese farms, that have been very successful at finding people to take over, either family members or others that have found people to sell the business to. But the majority of these businesses don't have a succession planning. And so what we have seen is, companies like Cypress Grove or Vermont Creamery or Cowgirl Creamery were sold to large corporations, European corporations. And there's politics about that, and people can feel whatever they want to feel. But the reality here is that when something changed from a family-owned business to a large corporation, the profits go to different places, and not always they end up staying within the community, and that is one of the worries. And so we know that there is a large number of cheesemakers working in Wisconsin, in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, that are first-generation migrants that arrive here with some expertise from El Salvador or Mexico or Guatemala, and they have been making cheese in these plants. Some of them in Wisconsin already even went through the cheese training program, and they certify there because that's what the rules are in Wisconsin. But what is more interesting, I think, is that their kids were born in those farms. These are kids that have cheese-making DNA in those farms. And there is little to none programming or ways to incentivize those young farmers to stay in place if they want to. There's just no options out there. And so this is an interesting topic that is part of, I think, is part of a larger conversation. In Vermont, there's a big conversation happening with the migrant justice movement that is targeting milk producers in the state. But I think it's one that needs to be talked about. And we're definitely trying to do something, first of all, just by highlighting who those people are, but in many ways, also try to find sort of a mentorship program or mentorship ways in which head cheesemakers ensure that their junior cheesemakers are staying within the business and they see a future for themselves in the business.
Absolutely. Yesenia, have you helped a lot of people learn how to make cheese? Vermont Shepherd has been around for a long time. What sort of teaching do you do?
Let me introduce David. He just walked in the door.
Hi, David. Nice to see you.
Well, even right now, we have family from the Dominican Republic that are cheesemakers that we've taught since February. And it's been interesting because the business has turned quickly for everybody needing to learn how to speak Spanish than just me, because they don't speak English.
Excellent.
People translate and all kinds of ways to try to figure out how to translate, make notes, spend time in doing that. So we've had quite a bit of my family come up off and on throughout the years. I've been here since 2005 and Cone since 2006. And I have lots of family from other countries, Dominican Republic and El Salvador, that have come up and helped us out, you know, and they're always, and a lot of them have the work ethic,
Mhm.
you know, to really do it because they're coming from countries that work hard,
Right.
you know, and so it's nice, you know, because they come here and it's harder, but it feels natural when you can just like jump back into the farm scene.
Yeah.
Can I
Yeah,
ask a
that
question,
sounds sort of
Cara?
magical. Oh, sorry, Ann, to you?
I feel like this is something that I'm really interested too, because my livelihood is tied to the livelihood of all the cheesemakers that I buy from. And many of those cheesemakers are now in their like 60s and they're like total forces of nature and just like, you know, make it happen every day. But I feel like there is a distinction between what Carlos was talking about you know, cheesemakers and mentorship in slightly larger companies where there might be more kind of like upward mobility within a larger, you know, cheesemaking company versus a small scale family artisan business. And I think that that transition to me is much more difficult than, I feel like they're both difficult. It's difficult and important to mentor people who are coming up in these larger cheesemaking operations so that they have better opportunities. But actually selling a small business, like a small crazy business, like a cheesemaking business to another generation, I feel like is exceedingly difficult. One of the only people that I know who's done it is Andy Hatch at Uplands Cheese in Dodgeville, Wisconsin. And I feel like that was almost like, you know, a gesture of just kind of like community and solidarity between Mike Gingrich, who was the former owner, and his co-owner, and Andy and his farmer co-owner, who are the next generation, because they kind of shopped it around to big corporations like the kinds of people who bought Cowgirl Creamery and Vermont Creamery, but there wasn't that efficiency of scale. And so those larger corporations took a pass. And then they decided to make it work for this, you know, for these two young people who wanted to make it happen. But I feel like it's just really, yeah, it's a really difficult nut to crack.
I mean, Blakesville Creamery, Veronica, yeah.
I think something that's like missing from this conversation about succession is the divestment of rural communities, right? We have people that don't want to take on their family business because there's nothing left in the town that they're living in. There's no local business, there's not good schools, you know, there's not opportunity, and people don't want to take that on. So I think, you know, for looking at wanting people to stay in the family business, we have to look at sort of the larger community and what that community can offer the next generation of cheesemakers.
That's a broader point you're making for sure. I just want to put it out there to the viewers on this session. If you have any questions that you'd like to write into us, we will try with the best of our tech abilities to answer them. So feel free to type in anything if you have a question for any of the panelists. Yeah, there's so much to go on. One thing I'd like to bring up, and raise your hand if you want to jump in first on this. In the US right now, there's a lot of food insecurity. Has anyone donated to food banks or worked with the government in any way to help people with the current issue that's going on right now? People are hungry out there, so, and there's a lot of milk. So has anyone had to work with food banks during this time? No, no one here?
We do to the Vermont Food Bank and food shelves and, you know, anywhere that we can donate to.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Veronica.
We've not worked with food banks, but we have worked with several restaurants that got grant funding from the government to provide, to essentially like transition their operation to like a soup kitchen so that they could keep their staff and keep cooking. And instead of making meals for customers, they're making meals for elderly people that are confined to their homes or people that are food insecure. And so, you know, we've worked in that capacity to donate cheese.
Okay. Okay. So that's there's some help there. I like that. In a lighter note, yeah, there was a question about any cheese books that we recommend. Anne was very good to write in about her newest book, which has a long title. Anne, can you say the title for everyone in case I don't want to mess it up?
Oh yeah, no, it's called The New Rules of Cheese, a freewheeling and informative guide. And I wanted it to be even longer, but the publisher wouldn't let me do it. So.
That's too bad.
But I also pointed out, I love Bronwyn and Frances Percival's book, Reinventing the Wheel. That has been one of my favorite cheese reads in like the last, 10 years. I thought that was an awesome book. So if anyone is ready to get slightly nerdier, that's a really great book.
Awesome. Any other book recs? Or actually, let me segue off of books for a moment, because one thing I'm kind of curious from each of you is, what does a post-COVID cheese industry look like to you? I'll throw this over to, I guess, Carlos. I like throwing it to Carlos. Carlos, what does post-COVID cheese industry world look like to you?
Well, so one of the first things that we saw from COVID was that the cheese industry accelerated in going online 5 years. I mean, cheese has been resistant to be sold online for a long time. There were a lot of people trying to sell it, and it was really difficult. And now it seems like this has exploded. So this has completely changed, and it will continue to do so. The other thing, and I would love to hear from Veronica as well, is that some of the producers that had fresh milk, fresh cheeses, stopped selling and started making cheeses that are more aged. So I get the feeling from the cheeses that I'm starting to see that some people are developing new recipes for cheeses that are more shelf stable, things that are more aged. And so there may be also a shift there. And some opening in raw milk cheese with people knowing that they're going to be aging their cheeses for longer than 60 days. So, they took the gamble to make raw milk cheese, not because it's dangerous, but because, you need to wait those 60 days before you can sell it.
I mean, I transitioned to I quickly came up with a recipe for an aged cheese. I mean, I don't think goat's milk is really suitable for long aging. So that's 2 months and, 2 to 4 months instead of, like a year. So I don't have a lot of flexibility that maybe like a cow producer or sheep producer has. But I think there's some opportunity for American cheesemakers to fill niches that I've noticed that they're in the marketplace, that there's not as much European cheese, I think, coming to the States as there was prior to COVID. And I think some of that had to do with tariffs that were placed on certain types of cheese. But I don't think that part is going to recover. And I think that that's an opportunity for American cheesemakers.
Super fair. Yes, Yesenia, we have 3 minutes, by the way, according to some folks in the Stone Barn, but I think that might be for either questions or our entire session. I'm not sure. We'll find out. Yesenia?
Well, we did do a transition to making a lot of more fresh products in order to do more local direct sales, because we do that aged cheese, and it does take 2 to 3 months, 2 months, but we don't sell it until it's 3 months. So, we were able to get through some grants and stuff, the right equipment to be able to do yogurt and pasteurize that or package that correctly. We're doing a lot more of the ricotta. We've moved to doing a fromage blanc, which is either all sheep milk or a cow sheep blend. So we definitely needed to make those adjustments, and it was all of those things that like really changed for us, like how we were doing things. Way busier in that way of like selling and marketing and putting things out there. But yeah, trying to figure out all those transitions of trying to make things available sooner.
I see. So I think
Here you go.
well, I'm seeing in the panel session, What? 12:15. Guys, we have an extra 15 minutes. That's what I thought. Excellent. Yay. So I was going to ask, has anyone increased their staff, and how has hiring been for you during this time then? Any new hiring since because with the holiday season things have picked up, or you needed to pack more mail order? Anne, did you want to jump in here?
Yeah, I was just going to say that we had to dramatically downsize our staff. When COVID hit, I think we had 10 employees, and then we're down to 5. We're down to 4 actually, and then we rehired. We were able to rehire 2 people back, but we're still not at full capacity. And with kind of the uncertainty, even though right now mail order is really busy for the holidays and people are doing a lot of kind of virtual events, it still feels like a risky time to hire back in full force, because we just don't know what January is going to bring.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then sort of an odd but not so odd segue in mail order. Corporate businesses, large companies tend to gift their employees really cool swag, or sometimes cheese now. So virtual cheesemongers for large companies. I'll throw it to Carlos on this one. Like I said, I love throwing it to Carlos. You looked away, Carlos. This is your fault. What do you think about virtual cheesemongers for large companies curating gifts to these larger companies?
I mean, I think that is not necessarily just cheesemongers, but there is definitely something happening in large corporations. We saw it first with Patagonia coming up with its own line of foods, but really a lot of the development of that line of foods that was happening for sale in their stores, along with their jackets and everything else they sell, was sort of troubleshoot inside of Patagonia itself, sending products to within their industry, their own company. And so I think, this is sort of this sort of development from the tech culture where, the big tech companies in California had cafeterias, they had, specialty food, a specialty coffee, this sort of like joins in with the idea of WeWork having also specialty coffee and all this. I think that there is something where either chefs or people that are specialists in food will be hired by these companies. I'm sure Anne can talk more about it as well. She has been doing sort of corporate sort of entertaining, and I know about a lot of other places. I think it's interesting that cheese is so giftable now. Again, it's one of those things that has changed. People were really afraid of cheese before as a gift, and now I think that has also changed for the better.
Yeah, and what do you think as well? Because I think in our pre-chat you mentioned like a larger company taking on a cheesemonger to curate cheese.
Oh yeah, well I think actually Carlos had mentioned that that GM had hired or had kind of created a new slate of classes around kind of a recurring slate of classes, which I would love to hear more about. And then from our end, we've been contacted by a lot of different groups that are putting together these virtual experiences for companies that would typically fly people in for a holiday party or a special dinner out or some other kind of, big event to close out the year. And now they're trying to, bring those experiences online. And so we've seen a lot of people doing virtual wine and cheese tastings. So we've been shipping out orders for, other companies that are handling that. And then on a more limited basis, we've been doing, I've been, leading some classes too, which it's interesting. But it also, I feel like makes me feel a little gross, because it's just kind of I don't know. I know there are so many people that are really suffering during this moment. And it's kind of just okay, here's the 1% kind of in their happy 1% land now having nice cheese shipped to them, which, I'm grateful that it's trickling back down to the right places, but it's also, I feel like it's a little bit of a conflict. One other thing that I'll add before I throw it back to Carlos, because I want to hear about the GM thing, is that I know in particular, some cheese shops have really pivoted to doing a lot of online education to help them shore up their sales. I was talking to Kendall Antonelli, who owns Antonelli's Cheese down in Austin. And they are doing, I think, like some ridiculous amount of classes a week, like 20 online classes a week or something like that. And she said that that has like single-handedly saved their business because, you know, their wholesale, the bottom dropped out on their wholesale. And because they didn't have a mail order component, that was something that they could really turn to.
I'll comment quickly on that. So this is through the grapevine, so you know, take it with a grain of salt as everything. So we heard that GM out in Detroit hire a local company that sells cheese, a cheesemonger, to do some of their classes for their executives, and they're not, you know, in-depth cheese 101. They're like 30 minutes, you know, quick things. Because a lot of the, you know, what we read is that, you know, corporate culture is suffering, whatever that means. But they're trying to maintain that, and you know, it has become very clear to people that you don't need to be in an office to do your job if you're doing certain types of jobs, right? And so they want to retain that talent, and one of those things that they're offering them is sort of these experience classes. And so one of this is cheese, but there's also you know, wine and chocolate tastings. You know, this is kind of a space. And to add to Anne's point is, I hope that this stays with the local stores, you know, doing the services for the local companies that are there, and not that all of a sudden it turns into a business that is a cottage industry completely on its own. Because right now, you know, small local stores are selling traditional and artisanal cheeses like the ones that Veronica and Yesenia make. But it very easily could turn into, you know, being cheese boards of you know, commodity cheddar, and you know, and so I hope that doesn't change, because then that will be really the 1% eating plastic cheese.
And that's actually, if I can interject for 1 second, I did start doing some looking around, because I was like, well, what are these other companies doing where bigger companies would traditionally order from? Maybe places like, I don't want to name names, but like Harry and David, or you know, bigger companies like that. And so I was looking around at some of these, because you get all these catalogs, you know, at this time of the year. And I was looking through these catalogs, and I was realizing, I was like, our mail order prices are a steal. I mean, even though it's like, you know, it seems like it costs a lot of money to have 3 half pounds of cheese shipped to you, you're getting like the best cheese in the country that's like handmade by Yesenia and David, or by Veronica. And Harry and David, you know, it's like, I was looking at a cookie basket. So I guess I'm comparing apples and oranges, but it was $80 for like a cookie basket. So I feel like, you know, if you know, if we can like turn that around a little bit, so that we're like actually giving people like great food for a fair price, even though it is, you know, it is more expensive to ship gifts like that. That was just something that I noticed.
Well, and another thing, because of legalities per state, I was doing some research as well, and wine and cheese sold together is not the easiest thing to set up legally, although it would be a tremendous help to both industries if we could somehow legally figure that out, because they are meant to be together. Side note, we did get a question from an attendee here that asked about the future demand of at-home cheese kits. Yes, at-home cheese making kits. I'm not so sure it's the easiest thing to do at home, but can anyone speak to that, about making cheese in the house during?
Don't do it.
Don't do it, right. I hate to say it's not the easiest thing. The only thing I can recommend from my old cheesemongering days is buying mozzarella curd at a local cheese counter and tempering it with hot water, wearing a lot of gloves, and that's your best bet. But I wouldn't recommend starting with green cheese like Veronica and Yesenia. Leave that to the pros. Sorry.
I agree, but one thing that I do want to say here is that we we get a lot of people that are very, very excited to make their own cheese at home at the coalition, asking us questions. And what we normally find is that, they go and make paneer, or they make queso Oaxaca or queso fresco. They're not so difficult to make. They make it, and then after that, they're like, oh my God, I would never try to do other things. So they kind of convert themselves. It's like, oh no, this is real labor that I don't want to pay attention to. I don't want to be making cheese every day and have milk arrive every day. That is just a lot of work.
Yeah.
So
even culturing yogurt or making your own butter, I mean, they're fun projects, but overall, if you can buy a terroir-based yogurt or butter, it's better for everyone all around, and probably more flavorful.
And again, if you get at that issue of cost, you're like, oh, this is a total bargain. Like, to be able to buy like a ready-made chunk of a wonderful cheese that someone else has aged for you for like 6 months or a year, like way better.
Totally.
If they are going to venture into their own cheese making, they need to make an investment in an animal first, and that should tie up their time for a little while before they get into cheese making.
I'll make sure everyone gets a cow in Brooklyn and see how that goes. Guys, we have 5 minutes. Is there any last points that anyone would like to make? If there's any last minute questions also, please try to get it to us as fast as you can, because we're almost done here. This was a quick one.
In the Q&A, there's a question for Veronica that I would like to hear from the American Cheese Society nonetheless. So what, if you could speak more about the divestment of rural communities, I think it is really pertinent to the conversation.
I mean, I don't have a lot of insight on it, but I think that that's kind of a driving force for why, not just dairy farmers and cheesemakers, but why people don't want to live in rural America, or why, kids grow up in rural America and move to the city, because, they're town. I mean, I drive through Wisconsin and I see there's a lot of like sad little towns that don't have their local grocer, don't have anything, and you have to ask yourself when you're like, in your 20s, why you would want to live there, what kind of opportunity that provides you. And so I think that we need to look at ways that we can invest in rural America so that people actually want to live there and continue to do these kinds of jobs. And it doesn't really matter who that is, whether that's, third, fourth generation Americans or migrant workers, but that's sort of my thought about that. And I don't know what that exactly looks like. That's pretty complicated problem to solve.
Yeah.
I think one possibly good thing about, I'm not I don't really like computers or technology. It's why I'm a cheesemaker. But I guess like the silver lining to all of this is you can be a little bit more connected with other parts of the world, and we're all finding that there's, you can be isolated even if you're in a densely populated area. So there are ways to connect those two communities.
I would love to hear Yesenia's thoughts on this, because I feel like Vermont is kind of the exception to that rule in some ways. Like Vermont is like full of vibrant little towns. And what would you attribute that to?
Well, I was just thinking, we have a blended family, and both of our kids, all of them except the little one, and she lives in, who knows, like she might be the one who's going to do it all, because she is the one who's been born and has really been in the mix of it. But that's been our hard part. Like we have live water that's just up the road, and actually, the son is taking over that farm. Our kids have, they've been out in the world a little bit more. So when they come home, their issues are that there aren't enough people. Like Alex would love to be working and on the farm, but he left because like he wants a sweetie here too, or somebody that he's doing. So that's what, like, kind of, either if you have that, then it's gonna work. You kind of need it because we're not a highly dense, state. But there are a lot of like groovy things that are happening around, and people are sticking around and love it. So I'm always, kind of like trying to figure out what's the right formula to convince my kids to just stay because, and I think for them, they just still feel like we've got this,
Mhm.
in our 60s and our 40s or whatever, we're still like hardcore going, and they still want to maybe then just see if they have more opportunity and doing other things in their 20s right now. The oldest is 31 and then it's 29. And that's our hope that
Mhm.
they're going to do that. And I think it's going to happen. It's just that in our current situation, it wasn't like that desirable right now for the boys. I have one that lives just up the road and he'll do a million things, but he just doesn't love to make cheese. He likes to be outside. The other one really does like to make cheese or can focus really hard on that, but that's very isolating, right, Veronica? So we end up doing these things that keep us
Right.
for a long time.
A few years ago, I had an intern from Switzerland, and the thing that he was sort of taken the most with was just how isolating being a cheesemaker in America was. That cheesemaking was a little bit more centrally located to towns in Europe. And it wasn't like he had to travel far to actually see people in Switzerland. And he was like, the hardest thing for me here in the United States is if I want to go see somebody, I have to get in a car and drive somewhere. And that was just like a really foreign concept to him, that you could be so far out from civilization. And, this was in upstate New York and we were 4 hours from New York City. I sort of had a different perspective on that, but that was the thing that stood out to him the most.
Yeah, that's usually what it is. But in Vermont, going back, there's a lot of people that are really groovy and doing a lot of alchemy and can do all these awesome crafty things, and they get really into it, whether it's fermentation, whether it's beer making. And I think that's what makes it happen here in Vermont, that there's people that can do it and they find a niche and they can get like a support group. And there are a lot of small little funky towns, but in those towns, there's a lot of support,
Absolutely.
They keep people inspired. And then when they see, folks like David and I, and they can come and see those things too, it just like inspires them more because we don't really want to change what we're doing.
Okay, so on that note, I want to thank everyone for being here and listening to our discussion. Cheers to looking forward to future cheesemakers, post-COVID cheese industry, positivity. So I want to thank everyone for doing this. And let me just check the chat in case we missed anything, but I think we're all set here. Yeah, I think this was it. Thank you guys. Thanks to the conference for having us, and have a great day.
All right, cheese people, you're amazing.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Take care.